And now I would like to invite for context setting for this session his extremely dynamic brother, Mr. Girish Tanti, the co-founder and vice chairman and founding member of Suzlon Energy Limited. He's also the member of CII's Renewable Energy Council, vice chairman of the Renewable Energy Manufacturing Task Force, and has been very actively engaged with various global forums on climate change and energy transition. I invite him for his address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Esteemed delegates from Government of India, Government of Tamil Nadu, esteemed speakers on the dais, my fellow industry colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. This session is in memory of legendary Shri Tulsi Bai, who is aptly known as the Windman of India, and as many also say, as father of Indian renewable energy. I think there is an unanimous agreement that the foundation on which the wind industry sector today is built over decades of relentless efforts and unmatched vision of Shri Tulsi Bai and many of his peers in the industry. Back when Tulsi Bai embarked on the wind energy journey, the industry was in its infancy. The MNES, which is now the MNRE, had just begun its existence in 1992, when the Indian wind energy stood at total installed capacity of minuscule 42 megawatts. The sector was essentially centered around just a couple of demo projects set up by Government of India in few states. Shri Tulsi Bai was a natural leader and inherited traits of owning to solve large societal and national issues. It was with this ownership and passion that he set up Suzlon in 1995 and took on the task to develop and grow the sector against all odds. The wind industry sector of those times was starkly different than what we see today. It was a new concept and there were challenges all around. Policymakers, technology access, manufacturing capacities, project execution capabilities, and even access to finance. Everything was either non-existent or it was in a very nascent stage. It was Tulsi Bai's passion, his commitment, that made him the de facto leader of a sector with no official or formal titles and positions. Experts and stakeholders, policymakers and veterans of the industry rallied around him. Shri Tulsi Bai was the unmatched person who connected with people so easily with his humility. I was always amazed with the tremendous love that he had for people and all the people. He just loved taking people along with him in his mission, from cabinet ministers to small vendors in the value chain. Tulsi Bai connected with all of them with a lot of humanity and empathy. This became one of his most valuable assets. He could not just rally support around him, he could also take all stakeholders to work towards building the sector in service of the nation that he was so devoted to. It was a continuous endeavor to bring all stakeholders of the industry and the government together on the same platform to unlock the true potential of renewable energy in our country. It was his passion and commitment to nation building and the cause for renewable energy that saw him spend countless hours convincing top iconic government officials and industry leaders in making the case for wind energy. Very easily, as he successfully converted murky clients like the Tata Group as well as Bajaj Group and several PSUs to get into wind energy as owners of wind power projects. It was this influx of private sector into wind energy that became the game changer in our country in the early 90s. By 2000, wind energy had grown to a total installed capacity of 1.2 gigawatts, a staggering 2,000% jump. By 2010, India had a cumulative installed capacity of 13 gigawatts. It was this foundation effort that caught the attention of government, who then came out with FIT regime and catapulted the industry further. Tulsi was a great believer in technology. He was convinced that getting access to world-class technology will be the single most critical deciding factor for India's wind energy success. He changed the scale of wind energy projects in India with the introduction of the first megawatt scale wind turbine when the market was still grappling with sub-megawatt turbines. With every step he took at Suzlon, he ensured that he took the nation 5 steps ahead. That was the vision of Tulsi Bai's nation. He always kept nation first above all and the sector before self. Tulsi Bai also wanted to showcase India's capability to the world. He successfully took Indian wind turbines globally, installing close to 6 gigawatts across 17 countries and 6 continents, making it one of the largest exports of technology and capital goods from India to the developed market in those time periods. He ensured that India was firmly entrenched in the global wind energy market, and India was recognized and respected for its wind energy manufacturing and technology. However, he understood that technology alone cannot do the job. We will need to build a very robust, domestic, thriving, indigenous supply chain of manufacturing. With deep conviction in Indian engineering and manufacturing expertise, he set out getting the best global vendors like LM Glass Fiber, Henson, and several others to build up large capacities in India, not just to serve Suzlon, but the entire industry. Many people feel that he set up the sector for his competitors to take advantage of. But anyone who has known Tulsi Bai would know that he never saw anyone as competition. He just saw everyone to work together in building large and stronger sector for our country. When he realized that blade testing was becoming a roadblock in India for the growth of our sector, he set up the world-class blade testing facility in our country, which was the only of its kind in the whole of Southern Hemisphere then. When solar industry made its impact in India, Tulsi Bai lent his voice without minute of hesitation to champion it. His vision was clear: anything that is beneficial to the nation has my support. He emphatically stated, this is not the time for competition, it's time for collaboration. Any energy which is green is welcome in creating a more sustainable world. Today, the world has validated his relentless effort and concerns in recognizing that climate emergency is the #1 crisis facing humanity, and renewable energy as the most valuable weapon that we have to combat it. Countries across the globe have set visions for net zero, ambitious renewable energy target, and robust energy transition plan. India is in the center of the world energy transition plan. India's growth journey from 42 megawatts in 1992 to 44 gigawatts today is nothing short of resounding testimony to Tulsi Bai's commitment and vision that gathered collective might of the wind industry. As we look ahead, our Honorable Prime Minister has given us a unifying vision for the future of our nation in the form of Atmanirbhar Bharat and the Panchamrit roadmap that is set up at COP26. In the last 2 years, we have also seen that large Indian corporates have stepped in the journey of their net zero plans. Today, India is positioned 3rd in the world in terms of renewable energy country attractiveness, only after US and China. India's renewable energy is one of the lowest cost and highly competitive source of power in the world today. Going forward, renewable energy will play a very significant role in achieving the net zero economy by 2070, and wind is going to shoulder a very strong burden of that. So where are we today? I mean, the global wind power is expected to grow from the current level of 1 terawatt, which we just crossed a few months back, to 2 terawatts by 2030. India is also ranked fourth in wind and renewable energy installations, with installations of 43 gigawatts onshore, which is almost 10.3% of our country's total capacity. In near term, we are all poised to grow the wind sector to 100 gigawatts by 2030. India is blessed with 765 gigawatts of wind potential, 700 of it coming from onshore and 70 gigawatts of offshore. To maintain the cost supremacy that India has in wind energy, there is an urgent need to create a domestic supply chain that's not just meet the domestic demand, but is also created a very robust market for tapping the huge global demand. The National Solar Mission in India was launched in 2010. However, the real incentives for domestic solar manufacturing came only in 2021. This led to heavy import dependence on solar sector, which is now moving towards domestic supply chain. This was not the case for onshore wind. Due to the visionary and relentless effort pioneered with leadership like Tulsi Bai, who created a thriving domestic supply chain, leveraging India's manufacturing and engineering capabilities. Some of the questions that we need to discuss during this conference are, in terms of how do we build a resilient wind energy supply chain, leveraging our existing ecosystem? How do we develop this ecosystem for a strong export focus? How do we build gigawatt size, round-the-clock hybrid projects? How can we leverage technology and innovation, not just in renewable energy, but storage technology and moving ahead in green fuels? Ways and means to accelerate our project executions. Design innovative financial mechanisms to help catapult the manufacturing and installations development. Shri Tulsi Bai's legacy is actually in each one of us sitting here today. Every single one of us who have either worked or interacted with Tulsi Bai carries a part of him. His influence on us has been profound. Just as Tulsi Bai has led the wind energy development in our country from 42 megawatts in 1995 to 44 gigawatts today, his soul will continue to guide us in this journey from here on to achieve the next 100 gigawatts by 2030 and net zero by 2070. As we pay tribute to Shri Tulsi Bai, I hope that we use his vision as our guiding light to make wind energy a significant contributor in the global energy transition endeavor to create a better world for our future generation. Jai Hind, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for leaving us with some food for thought and contemplation and giving us a first-hand introduction of a man, a personality who kick-started the green revolution in the country, a man who aimed for the stars and aimed for that sheen to illuminate everyone, but at the same time had his feet firm on the ground. A man with a golden heart, our tribute, our thanks, appreciation to Mr. Tulsi Tanti. And now, ladies and gentlemen, inviting another stalwart, another visionary, a game changer, Mr. Sumant Sinha, the founder, chairman, and CEO of Renew. Renew today is among the very few global companies that provides end-to-end solutions across the decarbonization spectrum, including renewable energy, energy storage, green hydrogen, and carbon credits. I request Mr. Sumant Sinha for his address.
Hi, thank you for that. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Girish and Vipul and all of the people assembled here for this really very exciting and interesting conference organized by IWTMA for their 25th anniversary, of course, but I think this is something that they are going to be doing every year. This session is obviously titled and in memory of Tulsi Bhai. who, as Girish said, touched many of us in the industry. And Girish, while he was your brother, he was Tulsi Bhai to all of us, actually. So I think that's the way we saw him. He was an elder brother to all of us. And I think he mentored many of us in our journey into renewable energy. And when I think back of my interactions with Tulsi Bhai, he was somebody who brought enormous passion and excitement to whatever he did. And that was infectious. So whenever you talked to him, you walked away with a sense of the endless possibilities that was there in whatever we were doing at that point in time. And I've seen that kind of ability in very few people. Tulsi Bhai was remarkably gifted in that sense. The second thing I found really very, very interesting about Tulsi Bhai, from which I tried to learn as much as I could, was that he had this incredible ability to relate to people. And if you look at his team at Suzlon, so many of them have been there for so many years that have stood by him and stood by the Tanti family through all the thick and thin that Suzlon has gone through over the years. And to engender that level of loyalty and that level of partnering and that level of staying committed to each other, I think is something that was really remarkable. It's something that I also try to figure out how to get that level of engagement with people, but I think he was really quite remarkable in that respect. There were many, many stories that I'm sure all of us have of our interactions with Tulsi Bhai over the years. The one that stands out for me is perhaps my last interaction with him, where we were actually in Denmark at the time. And this was actually last year, I think towards the middle of summer, when the Prime Minister had gone to Denmark on a trip, and Tulsi Bhai and I were both part of the business delegation that had gone along with the Prime Minister. And we had a state banquet actually that evening at the Queen's house, at the Queen's Palace actually, I should say, not a house. And it was obviously something that I was very excited about to go there. But then after the dinner finished, there was a very small sit-down get-together with the Prime Minister and the Queen. And there were only 2 Indians who were invited among the whole delegation of Indians who were there for that little sit-down with the Prime Minister and the Queen. And you can guess who those 2 were. One, of course, was Tulsi Bhai. And I was fortunate enough to be in that small group as well. And I think when that whole dinner finished, then Tulsi Bhai and I was sort of talking to each other and saying that we were so sort of fortunate that in that event that the 2 of us had been called. And in some ways, we were thinking that that was a reflection of the whole importance of the whole renewable energy industry, because we were the only 2 renewable energy people who were there in that delegation, and we were both asked to come for this. And after that event finished, then he and I sat down and we went and we had a cup of tea with each other. And talking to Tulsi Bhai was always as if you were connected to him very, very closely. So that was unfortunately the last interaction that I had with him, which was where I actually sat down and spent some time with him. But it was always a pleasure working with him and interacting with him. But I think one thing that he was very supportive of was when I had decided to leave Suzlon in 2010 and I had decided to start Renew. Tulsi Bhai was extremely supportive. I thought he might be not very happy with the fact that I decided to leave, but he was extremely supportive. And he said, no, Sumant, this is something that you must do. And he saw it as his mission to move people on their entrepreneurial journey as well. And he said, that's what I have done, and I want as many more people that can go off on this journey as possible. And in the first 1 or 2 years of Renew's journey, our first project actually was done by Suzlon. It was a 25 megawatt project that we did in Jasdan in Gujarat, which was done by Suzlon. And then through the first few years of our company, I think Tulsi Bhai was always very supportive to us, and for that I should always be grateful to him and to Suzlon for all the support that we got in the initial years. That really is what set us off on our journey at Renew. And over the last 12 years as a company now, we've made a lot of fairly good progress. We diversified into solar back in 2013-14 because we thought that that was something that would be taking off. But our heritage, in a sense, was always in wind, because that was my background and the background of a lot of us who joined Renew quite early. And you know, where we are today now is that we have almost 5,000 megawatts of wind capacity commissioned across the country. And we are building another close to 3,000 megawatts more, which we hope to construct in the next 2 years. And as all of you know, adding capacity in wind is not that straightforward, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I think it's quite remarkable what we have been able to achieve as a company. We now currently own almost 10% of India, actually more than 10% of all of India's installed wind energy capacity across the country. We manage about 150 wind sites in different parts of India. We own more than 2,000 turbines. I don't know exactly what the latest number is, but it's probably a little bit more than that. And as far as possible, we do the asset management and the O&M ourselves, because we feel that's a way for us to extract a little bit more performance as well from our machines. And so it's been an interesting journey for us. It's been a tough journey, but I think it continues. And I think now with the government's targets of increasing capacity of renewable energy to 500 gigawatts by 2030, as we all know, wind has to play an incredibly important role in that. We know that already we have only about 65 gigawatts of installed solar capacity, but it's already causing issues around daytime peak and so on. And wind is actually very critical from a grid balancing and management standpoint. And the fact that wind, you know, is there in the evening and at night time provides a certain kind of a profile that is very critical to manage the whole grid. So wind will have a very, very important role to play in the whole achievement of this 500 gigawatt target, because we can't just keep endlessly adding solar because of all the reasons that I mentioned. So we do need to have a lot more wind capacity that comes in. The other thing that we have pioneered is really the whole issue of round-the-clock power solutions. We won the first RTC bid that happened actually in the depths of COVID back in 2020. It was a 400 megawatt project where we were asked to provide an 80% plant load factor for that 400 megawatts. We are developing this project right now. It will be getting commissioned later in this financial year. And to actually deliver that project, we actually having to set up almost 2.5 times the wind capacity to actually deliver the profile that we are being asked to deliver. And so for all of these round-the-clock power projects, if you really want to look at optimizing costs, you have to have a fairly large amount of wind capacity. Otherwise, it's very hard to be able to deliver the right level of cost at the right profile. And now, given the government's focus and given the utilities requirements of more and more of these kinds of high PLF bids, you will see more of these bids coming up. And now, as you know, utilities are asking for these load-following bids as well, where they give you their load profile and they say, okay, this is the load that I have every month for the next 12, over a course of a year, and give me a generation profile that is somewhere plus minus of this load profile, because that makes it just much easier for them to absorb the power into their system without having to then manage a lot of the issues around intermittency and find out how much solar, how much wind, do the grid balancing, and so on. So they're just looking for simple solutions. And those simple solutions really require a very high degree of wind energy along with solar. And of course, I know that various IPPs have different kinds of solutions. Some are basing it more on solar plus pumped hydro storage. That's clearly one potential possibility. But in our view, and given our wind expertise, we believe that using more of wind allows us to get a better, more optimal solution. And so different companies will go down different sort of methods and configurations. Our chosen one is a little bit more wind heavy. And as a result of that, you will see more and more wind projects having to go into these RTC kinds of bids. And so therefore, also I feel that of this 500 gigawatts, of which about 150, 160 is already done, and another 300 gigawatts will have to be built out, a significant chunk of that, maybe 100, 150 gigawatts will have to be wind, ideally speaking. But we need this by 2030. and today we are already at 2023. So in 7 years, we all know collectively in this room together that there is no way that we can add 100 gigawatts of wind over the next 7 years. We know it's simply not going to happen because that means almost 15 gigawatts of wind every year. So the interesting dilemma for us as wind industry people is that the market opportunity clearly is there. There is no dispute about that, right? The question is, how do we actually deliver this capacity on the ground? And that's really where I think we need to do a lot of work, because all of you have been in the wind industry for many years. You know that the maximum that we've added in any 1 year, that was also 5-6 years ago, was about 5,000 megawatts. And that was a time when the feed-in tariff system across different states made sense. And you could plan the implementation 1 or 2 years in advance, and that's how we did 5 gigawatts. But for the most part, we've been averaging 1.5 to 2 gigawatts a year, right? So how do we ramp this 1.5 to 2 gigawatts up to 5 or 10 or even more gigawatts than that? And there I have serious concerns, because all of you who execute wind projects know that execution of wind projects on the ground in India is very hard. So that's one problem: acquiring land, solving right-of-way problems, and executing projects at the ground level is very difficult. And I think that there are multiple constraints there. One is we simply don't have enough trained people who can actually do all of these projects. The second is we don't have enough wind turbine manufacturing capacity of the right kinds of models. We have a lot of capacity, but a lot of that is getting exported out of India. Some of the OEMs don't want to sell in India because the price points in India are much lower. So I think that's one of the issues that we have to look at. So, you know, a lot of the OEMs I know that I've been talking to over the last day or two here are looking to ramp up their capacities, but we need to do it relatively quickly. The other constraint, obviously, is transmission capacity. We don't have enough transmission capacity in the country. It is all getting built out right now. So how does that work in sync with the capacity that we need to add in the right geographies is the other issue that we all need to also collectively work on. So there are quite a few different kinds of issues that we have to deal with. And I think unless we debottleneck all of these areas, it'll be very hard for us to get to that, the targets that we need to aspire to. So I think as we sit down and debate some of these issues over the next day or two in this conference, and of course in all of the interactions that we have subsequently between all of ourselves, I think that's one of the things we must really think about. How do we collectively debottleneck the sector in a way that we don't let the costs go up too high, because we know that we do have to compete with other configurations, but at the same time, we also ramp up volumes quite considerably. You know, at this G20 New Delhi declaration that happened, the G20 countries collectively agreed that they wanted to set a target of tripling renewable energy installed capacity by 2030, right? So if wind is to take its share, and if I look at those numbers, even according to that, we have to add 80 gigawatts of wind additional in the next 7 years, which is also more than 10 gigawatts. So whichever way you slice or dice the numbers, the reality is we have to add a tremendous, tremendous amount of wind capacity. And today, despite all the efforts of all of us over the last so many years, we are not at the point where we can do this. And I scratch my head to figure out what is the right solution here, because there are physical, practical constraints. Now, one of the solutions, of course, which has been advocated by some folks, is offshore wind. But we all know that offshore wind is a lot more expensive, and it will take several years for the government to auction those capacities off and then figure out who's going to buy the power and whether there's going to be viability gap funding and those kinds of things. So that may not contribute a large part to the 2030 solution. So I think let's figure out what we can do to address this problem. I think we need more people to be there at the execution end. There needs to be more professionalization, I think, in the sector as well, especially at the execution end, because I think really that's where over the last 10, 15 years that I have seen this industry, it has not really evolved and professionalized as much as it should have. So I think those are some of the issues that I have. As I said, just to recap, market opportunity is tremendous, but we all have to collectively figure out how we can actually achieve this target. I wish I could give a more positive and optimistic message, but there is optimism in the fact that the market appetite is there. But as I said, we have to find the right solutions to implement more capacity. I'm thinking of whether there's anything else. I think, look, as far as capital is concerned, there's enough capital available, both on the equity side and the debt side. So I don't see capital as being a constraining factor at all. I just think we need many more people to come in on the execution front. And I think if we can do that, then we'll be able to achieve our targets. So let's focus on that. And I think as we do that, hopefully we can then really aspire to create the vision that Tulsi Bhai had so many years ago when he started, along with a few others, this wind industry. I am always going to be thankful to him. And I'm also really looking forward to working with all of you even more closely for us to collectively take our, find a way to meeting all of our, not just our targets, but the country's targets and the world's targets, because this is something that is not just good from a commercial standpoint, but let's keep reminding ourselves it's very important from a actual humanity standpoint as well. And so the task that we're doing is a very noble task. It's a very important task. So let's continue to focus on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for inspiring everyone and leaving us with certain concerns and challenges which are there, which we need to focus on and collaborate as we bridge this gap between the present installed capacity and the targets which we have. 7 years, a huge target ahead, and we need to all work together. And also, thank you for introducing us to a very special and impressive trait of Mr. Tulsi Tanti when you mentioned that he was not just building companies, he was building relationships. He was like a father figure, in fact, letting his people and employees grow and be on their own path and look into their own entrepreneurial journey. That's the mark of a great man. Thank you very much, sir. And now inviting our next master speaker, Mr. Vipul Tuli, the Chairman South Asia and CEO of the hydrogen business of Sembcorp Industry. He has more than 30 years of experience in the energy sector, having advised the government government on issues of energy policy, working with the industry, working on the industry structure and also the regulations. So I request Mr. Vipul Tuli to please address this August gathering.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, captains of industry, very good afternoon. It's my great privilege to be invited here to be part of this first Tulsi Tanti Memorial Talk. I'm actually quite awed and privileged to be surrounded by industry stalwarts who have built this wind industry brick by brick, or should I say turbine by turbine. But also because, as many people have said already, Tulsi Bhai was really someone special. For us at Sembcorp, he was really, along with Suzlon, a very valuable partner. But most of all, because for me personally over time, he became a friend and really a senior guide. Every conversation with him was a lesson. Every conversation was a lesson in maintaining energy and enthusiasm. Never mind whether the industry is going up or down, but maintain energy and enthusiasm. Constantly be in the search of innovation, whether it's new technology, whether it's new business models, new industry frameworks, regulatory frameworks, always be looking for that innovation. And of course, as Girish Bhai has also said, his humility. This was a person who, in all the years I knew him, I've never heard him say one unkind word for anyone. I doubt if too many of our professional acquaintances or friends we can say that of. Never an unkind word, willing to engage hands-on, personally. So thank you for inviting me. I'm really privileged to be here. I'd like to talk about, maybe build on some of the themes that Sumant has very nicely touched. I'd like to talk about what lessons do the last 4 decades of wind hold for us as we look at the next 2 decades. Okay? So let's start with what has our wind industry achieved for India. Many people have talked about it. I'd like to focus on 3 things. What has the wind industry achieved for India? Number 1, it has literally put India on the global map as a global leader in wind manufacturing. Okay? Of course, Suzlon was the early pioneer, but then many other local OEMs came up, and then over time, the system manufacturers, the MNCs also saw the potential of India's highly skilled workforce, our innovation and the value chain ecosystem, and have come in. We've become a major exporter as well today of wind equipment, wind components, etc. Today, the industry is operating at a system level, maybe not at a component level, but at least at a system level, at around 85% indigenization. That is quite remarkable. If you think about industries around the country that have achieved this, very few industries have managed to achieve this. So putting India as one of the global leaders for wind. I think number two, I would point out techno-commercial innovation in the business models, okay? India introduced tariff-based competitive bidding when the world thought it was impossible. Even up till 6 months before the bids came, everyone was, no, this is not possible. Then, to make the tariffs more competitive, all of us had to innovate every aspect of the business system, right? Whether it was the WTG designs for low wind speeds, whether it was EPC models that flush out the inefficiency, whether it's infrastructure sharing that maximize the asset productivity, whether it's digital O&M practices that integrate the digital and the physical. Today, okay, on this phone, I am able to get every 10-second data on almost 200 parameters of every single wind turbine that we operate. Real-time, cyber secure. That integrating with what physically, with the people climbing the turbine is actually what gets the productivity out. Major maintenance innovations that have happened across the industry, whether it's craneless interventions that minimize site disruptions and ROW or others. So if you look across all of this, the kind of innovation that this industry, all of you sitting here and all of your colleagues who are out there in the exhibitions have managed to do is something remarkable. I dare say very few industries across the world have managed to do that sort of innovation. And number three, I'd say we've managed to create some very, very capable IPPs, right? Some of the largest projects now are being done here, 300, 500 megawatts per project or even larger, up from hardly a few years ago, it used to be 30, 40 megawatts. Today, some of the largest turbines for this wind speed environment now touching 3.5, 4 megawatts as well. And together, as a result, we managed to build about 44, 45 megawatts successfully commissioned and operating, right? I would say that despite, or maybe even because of the ruthless competition, our IPPs today are second to none in the world. In fact, on a lighter note, I'd say if you can succeed and compete in India, you can pretty much succeed and compete anywhere in the world, okay? So we've done some things very well as an industry, and with the support of the policymakers, the government at the central level, state level, achieved what very few industries could have achieved. Several people have talked about it in the inaugural session and even before me, that all of us have a sense that the golden years of wind are ahead of us. We can all see, you just look at the prevailing merchant tariffs in the evening when wind generates, and it's easy to understand why customers are demanding wind, right? Whether it's the DISCOM saying, give me RTC, or even standalone to balance, whether it's the C&I customers now saying, give me RTC, whether it's green hydrogen, where the numbers actually, if you start to add up, are quite staggering. Whichever way you look at it, the fact is the golden years of wind are coming. But before we get into there, let's look at some hard facts and a reality check today, okay? As Sumant said, I would be even harsher. We are only able to deliver on average 2 to 3 megawatts, 2 to 3 gigawatts per year, right, domestically. That's what we are net able to deliver. Despite the capability, despite the supply chains, despite everything. Other than 4 or 5 projects, if you look at the 13 SECI rounds of bidding, other than 4 or 5 projects, not one has completed on time. Okay? Every single one of our local OEMs has lurched in and out of bankruptcy to some extent or the other. In fact, the wind MNCs have suffered a similar fate. Supply chains, you all know the whiplash that has caused as you go from big order backlog to no orders and back and forth. As a result, we've often struggled to retain and attract the talent and to deploy them towards the innovation that we need, right? Most of all, I would say that the forward-looking investments that were needed in masts, in sites, in connectivity, which, by the way, Tulsi Bai was one of the biggest advocates for, and in fact really put Suzlon's balance sheet and Suzlon's efforts behind it. These have become more and more difficult to justify today as the margins have got squeezed. Okay? So I think we really do need to look at what lessons does the past hold for us as we want to scale up. Whether we are industry, whether we are policymakers, whether we are financiers, or whether we are customers. What I'd like to do is talk about 5 areas, just highlight them and just pose one question each for each area, collectively for us as industry and policymakers. Okay? Number 1, most important to my mind, is the bidding trajectory. I think the 10 gigawatt per year, 5-year trajectory that the MNRE has announced is the most critical factor. We must thank MNRE for declaring it. Besides allowing us to meet our capacity targets as a country, this is crucial for the manufacturers, because otherwise you can't have sustainable supply chains, you can't have sustainable capacities. We have to give our manufacturers the viability, the sustainability they need to make that technology investment. So question 1 is, can we stick to this trajectory come what may? Can we ensure that it is never less than that if we want a wind industry? Or if we increase it, as the point Sumant was making, or if we increase it, can we also increase it gradually so that we don't get the opposite whiplash, the boom and bust? So question 1, can we stick to this trajectory, come what may? Second, IPP commitments. Of the 6 main assumptions that go into a wind project, wind resource, site being available, turbine costs, O&M costs, financing costs, and connectivity. Most projects can get away if 1 or 2 of these things go wrong. No project can survive 3 or 4 of these going wrong. Okay? I think any IPP or anyone executing a project has felt that pain. We are all familiar with the impact that this hyper competition has had along with the ERAs on investment returns. MNRE and SECI, I would say, have done their job by trying to move us to this closed envelope bidding system. In fact, I would say they've tried to do their bit to dial down the competition from hyper competitive to fair competition. So that's done. Question is industry willing to improve its conduct? Okay. Are we ready to make commitments only that we can deliver? Okay. This is a crucial point. In the past, as I said earlier, the WRA, the site pre-investments were done by people like Tulsi Bai at great cost to them. Today, are IPPs leaving themselves that room to make these investments? If not, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, how are we going to do even 10 gigawatts a year? We need to leave ourselves enough margins to make those investments. So that's the second point, IPP commitments. Third, availability of transmission capacity at scale and with certain timelines. See, if you look at the past 10 years, we have seen a steady decline in the actual available transmission capacity that is suitable for wind, despite huge efforts being done by the central grid, huge amounts of capacity additions being done by everyone. In the FIT days, it wasn't an issue. Since capacities were distributed relatively smaller, Transco's got enough time to plan. But if you look at the last 6 years of SECI bidding, we've literally exhausted wind capacity. We all know, despite everyone's best efforts, there are 2 or 3 wind substations everyone is trying to do projects at. Okay? So I would say pre-investment in substations, providing certainty of the substation timing and its capacity will substantially alter the risk profile of wind. So question 3 is, can we aim to have at least 30 to 40 gigawatts of available time-assured ISTS capacity in wind zones? Why 30 or 40? If you want to do 10 a year, maybe increase that slightly. You have 2 to 3 years to do projects. You need to have that visibility. Otherwise, you're basically punting in the dark. And then every day trying to see, oh, substation, aa raha hai, nahi aa raha hai, aa raha hai, nahi aa raha hai. So can we have 30 to 40 gigawatts of available assured ISTS substation? It's a pre-investment. It is a small price to pay for the country to enable the kind of massive capacity addition that we are talking about in wind. Number 4, I want to talk about site security and social engagement. Fact is, ROW issues are getting worse, not better. Yeah. Which OEM or EPC or IPP is not working with almost daily administrative support, which the administration is very kindly providing, or even frequent work stoppages? Today we built 44 gigawatts. If we want to get to 66 gigawatts for our 110, I'm taking the 140 target and saying 30 is offshore, so let's say 110. If you want to do another 66, we need a better solution for ROW. We need a better solution for social engagement. So question 4 is, are we ready to engage in a serious dialogue about how to garner more local community support for wind projects? Whether it's IPPs, whether it's EPCs, whether it's OEMs, whether it's central government, whether it's state governments, whether it's civil society. Are we ready to have an open, action-based dialogue on how to make this happen? Whether it's, notified site status for these projects, whether it's better telecom act type of rights to do transmission, or it's something more sustainable to give back to the local communities. Let me put this as a suggestion or a challenge for IWTMA and for the associations to see whether you can make this dialogue happen, number 4. Number 5, last point, is offshore wind at scale. This may not be really giving us the scale in the 3 to 5 year time frame, but certainly the fact of the matter is we've done a great job of increasing from the wind potential onshore from about 50 to, let's say, around 150 gigawatt wind potential. But if we want to power RTC the way customers are lining up, if we want to power green hydrogen the way some emerging signs are that it will line up, we'll have to go much beyond onshore. We simply will not have the space or the capacity to do it onshore, so we have to go to offshore. We have a long coastline, but the fact is it's blessed with reasonable, but not the world's best, kind of PLF. What worries me the most is if you look globally what's happening. Massive offshore cost overruns are happening. Investors are starting to rethink about the risks, the costs, the appetite for taking on large offshore projects. So question 5 for us really as an industry is, can we put in place a viability funding mechanism that takes learnings from the global experience and actually mitigates the risk to make this thing move? Not go for hyper competitiveness in the first stages, get something that actually works from a viability gap funding, keeping into account what's happening globally. So 5 challenges. I'll recap. Can we stick to the bidding trajectory come what may? Can IPPs be ready to improve their conduct and commit only what they deliver? Are we ready to have in place pre-invested 30 to 40 gigawatts of wind-suitable transmission capacity? Are we ready to do a serious dialogue with all stakeholders to mitigate our ROW site issues? And are we ready to put a viable, sustainable offshore mechanism in place? 5 challenges. Doable, massive opportunity in front of us. I hope we can go for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tuli, for these very constructive suggestions and recommendations which can help us in unleashing the potential as we move from the strong foundation which has already been provided and moving to the golden period which we are aiming at, and within that certain concerns, challenges which we need to address. Thank you for sharing with us and the solutions towards it. So ladies and gentlemen, as we close this session, we would like to express our thanks to all our 3 distinguished speakers. I would like to request and invite Mr. Hemkant Limai, the Executive Committee member of IWTMA, to please present the mementos, our expression of thanks, gratitude, appreciation to them. Thanking first Mr. Girish Tanti. Gratitude, appreciation to Mr. Sumant Sinha. And thank you very much to Mr. Vipul Tuli. Thank you, sir. Request you gentlemen for a group photograph. Thank you.